Liar, a book by W.P. Thrift, read by name redacted, Chapter 4, Faith. Larry felt his body grow cold, numb. His head slowly started spinning. He wanted to ask her if she was serious, but the way she looked left no doubt. Except that was too hard for him to just accept. He refused to believe it was true. Larry squared off with her, standing over her as she sat grief-stricken on his couch, and demanded to know how she got here so fast from California. This is a prank, right, Kim? You're going way too far with this, way too far. A creaking floorboard caught his attention and made his head snap up towards the hallway which led to his bedroom. David, his brother-in-law and his sister's husband, stepped out. He'd been standing there when Larry had come in, but having caught sight of his sister straight away made him miss seeing the guy there. "Come on, Larry. Enough," David said, walking across the living room and going to sit next to his wife. David had hoped to give these two some private time to chat, but he couldn't ignore his wife's agony like that. "When we heard your and Kim's mom had checked into hospice, we caught the first flight we could get. But she passed before we touched down. We were coming here to see if you wanted to come with us to the hospice to see her when we received the news." No, come on." Larry shook his head. If you just tell me you're joking now, I can still let this drop, okay? I mean, Mom hasn't even been sick. I haven't heard anything about this." "Because you were too busy working on your damn promotion," Kim said under her breath. "It's not like I ignored any calls from her." "You didn't call her either." Kim shot a glare back up at him. Then her expression melted from a sneer back to her purely falling apart as she put her head into her husband's chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, just letting her cry. Larry felt like he was going to collapse. He'd never felt such fear before. It felt like the room was spinning. His chest burned. A powerful surge of vertigo forced him to collapse towards the nearest chair, catching himself on it with one hand and keeping himself from hitting the floor just long enough to get his butt up onto the seat. He held himself and doubled over, feeling the first tears begin to roll down his own face. It's possible he uttered an apology to his sister, but the voice he heard was too broken and feeble to be his own. When he saw her at the wake, there was no longer any doubts. While his sister spent quite a bit of time talking with her, he couldn't stand to look at her for more than a heartbeat. It was too much. This shriveled, weak husk was not the strong woman that had raised him, made his meals, helped him with his homework, supported him when he was first starting out in the world. He refused to accept it. Larry mingled with relatives he'd long forgotten, ones he hadn't seen since he was very young. Someone had made a clip show of images that played on loop in one hall. He glanced at it for a bit, but saw his mom standing over him in a penguin costume he'd worn one Halloween when he was 12, and looked far too old in that picture to be trick-or-treating at all, let alone dressed like that. It wasn't his fault he hit a growth spurt early. He still wanted to trick-or-treat. But today, that picture just embarrassed him, so he left that room too. Making small talk with people whose names he couldn't remember in a place like this felt so deeply uncomfortable to him. He wanted to run screaming from this building. He wanted to shout at the person talking to him to just shut the hell up already. Stop talking to him. Get away from him. Stop pretending like his mom was gone. Stop acting like he knew him at all. Instead, he smiled and faked a laugh at an absolutely tedious joke. He looked concerned when the person, possibly a second cousin of his, but he would never be certain, brought up a problem of their own. He replied with a few stock phrases he often used in business meetings. He carried on pretending like he wasn't slowly growing to hate everyone in this building. The following day at the funeral was far easier for him. His sister had final words prepared, so he wasn't required to talk at all in front of a crowd which was far larger than the one at the funeral home. And as this was a more ceremonial gathering, far more formal than the informal wake, he was not required to carry on small talk with anyone. He wasn't forced to pretend to know these people that he hadn't seen since he was a preteen. While sitting on one of the front pews of the church which his mother had regularly attended right up until the end, Larry found himself deep in thought. He'd mostly hardened his heart after his initial cry, numb to the world as he drifted through it over the next couple days. Standing behind the lectern, the preacher wanted to go into a parable about something or another, and Larry fought back a audible groan. The veracity to which he tuned out the preacher's verbosity created the first gap in time in his mind to really think about things again for the first time in a while. And the main thought, I just had a death in the family. Larry's words to the manager of the phone store, Melissa. He hadn't even thought about his powers in the last few days. The shock of losing his parent, dropping that from his might until this very moment. There's no way. In the back of his mind, he dismissed everything as merely a flight of fancy, a hallucination he'd been having due to the general tedium in his life making him read far too much into mere coincidences. He'd pushed it all out. But now that those words came back to him, Larry felt his heart rev up again, pounding rapidly at the thought that his words may have killed his own. No, it couldn't have. Larry argued against it. I meant like a distant cousin or something had died and had me messed up and acting out. His friend Mike's words came back to him, that it could be up to the interpretation of whoever hears his words that decide what they mean. It doesn't matter his own intentions, it's how the other person took it. Melissa may have lost one or both parents that she was very close to, herself, and so that's where her mind went when he said those words to her. But the phone I stole didn't vanish when I said I didn't steal it. Why didn't it vanish? If I actually have these powers, then why didn't that work? It's a matter of faith, the preacher boomed across the church. You just have to believe in him, and salvation will be yours. Belief. Larry thought, the realization of such an obvious idea striking him like lightning, sending chills through his body when he suddenly realized he'd cracked the code. The person I'm talking to has to believe me. They have to believe the lie, and then, after that, it's up to their own interpretation as to how reality reorients itself to conform to that new reality. They have to believe my lie for it to come true. So much was suddenly clear to him now, every factor in what made his power work. Nobody believed him when he said he didn't steal, so he still had the phone on him. Hell, Mike probably never believed a word he was saying about the new cat appearing. That's why Mike didn't get a new car when he asked for. A little faith would have delivered unto him a miracle, in the form of a nice new ride. This realization also put a crushing burden on Larry. If his powers were real, if they did exist, then he really had just caused all of this to happen. This was his fault. He did this. Hey, pal, it's all right, an older gentleman sitting next to him said, patting him lightly on the shoulder, likely someone that knew his mom well. Larry had no idea who he was. The guy didn't know Larry either, given he didn't say his name. Why does he bother me? Larry wondered. Larry had no idea why the guy was bothering him, or what the guy's face looked like. His vision was as twisted as looking through a stained glass mirror with a sudden flood of tears running down his face. Why's he bother me? Just leave me alone. Leave me alone. I don't deserve any sympathies. I should be in that casket. Missing a week of work just before his big promotion went into effect would normally look very bad on an employee's record, but in his specific case, his boss made an exception for him. Everyone understood well enough to let him have some time to himself to grieve. Larry spent his days laying on his bed, Sherbert usually nestled against his side. He'd pet his cat absent-mindedly while staring up at the ceiling, deep in thought. And none of his thoughts were good. He didn't feel like working, he didn't feel like talking to anyone, seeing any friends, discussing any of this with his sister. His sister had called him once, and apologized for thinking he wasn't taking their mom's dead seriously. She'd assumed that about him for a while, though she'd never said it. But after how he'd broken down towards the end of the funeral, she said she realized just how much grief he'd been holding back. He didn't want to tell her it wasn't grief, it was guilt. How could he ever tell anyone that? How could he ever face the world again at any capacity knowing what he'd done? In his mind, it was entirely his fault. He'd committed murder and gotten away with it. And his victim was the last person on earth he'd have wanted to harm. A loud growling of his stomach woke his cat for a moment, and then Sherbert put his head back down and began to doze again. Larry hadn't been eating. He barely even drank water. I'd give anything if I could just roll back time, Sherbert, Larry told the cat, his voice raspy. Never go to that phone store. Never use this power. He glanced over at his flip phone sitting on his desk. He felt a sudden inclination to call the phone store, an idea having popping into his mind. He didn't know the number, and the phone didn't have Google like a proper smartphone would to just look the number up. You're insane, Larry told himself as he got up and grabbed his phone, walking towards the living room. You've absolutely lost it. Stop this. Go lay down. Pet Sherbert, just stop this. It's over, Larry. Don't torture yourself like this. Hello, is Melissa there? Larry asked. He'd looked up the store's number on his computer while telling himself not to do this. Yes, just a moment. And may I ask who's calling? He didn't think this would work, but he was in hell. He would do anything, anything for a chance to get out of this misery he'd plunged himself into. Tell her it's an acquaintance. This felt like such an extreme solution. The ultimate refusal to accept his own fate, to spit in the face of the God his mother had so deeply believed in. But he didn't care. Hello, this is Melissa. How may I help you? He was beyond desperate. This is Larry Wilson, the man you had in your office the other day. Yes, Mr. Wilson. Again, my deepest sympathies go out to you. I did do some research after you left my office to see if you'd pulled a fast one on me, and I found the article about your mother in the obituary. I'm very sorry for your loss. I wanted to call to apologize. There's no need for that. You're still banned from the store, of course, but I don't hold a grudge against you or anything like that. Tears rolled down his face. Larry held the phone away from his mouth for a second so he could clear his throat before continuing. You should. Pardon. The guilt has been eating me up inside, so I have to confess something to you. Guilt? Confess what? 1. I faked my own mother's death to get out of being arrested at your store. Excuse me? I faked my mother's death. She's still alive. I called the paper and asked them to add her name to the obituary, just to make sure you were fooled if you did research into it. No, I know someone that went to her wake. She was dearly loved, member of her community. I'd actually met her once, though I had no idea you were her son. That was a mannequin in very believable makeup, Larry said without hesitation. I was very thorough to cover all of my bases. Larry, I know the loss of a loved one can be hard to accept sometimes, but you're just hurting yourself by making up wild stories like this. Why won't you believe me? Larry shouted into the phone, his composure breaking, flipping on a dime from a calm stream to a raging river. You believed me so easily before. Why is this so much harder for you? Please, listen. You need to seek professional help for this. I understand better than most just how much the loss of a parent can affect someone's mental state of being. Sometimes you begin to hallucinate certain realities that just aren't true, and sometimes you'll fight yourself to convince yourself they are true. These aren't my words, but the words of someone that helped me out a great deal a few years back. Would you like their number? Larry hung up. How many people need to believe me? Just one, right? Just one person? Kim's out. It'd be cruel to say something like that to her. But who else? Mike. No, he didn't believe me before. And he so easily lied to me, made me believe that he did believe me. Why was it so easy for him to lie to me? Who else? Who else do I know that would be so heartless, so callous as to believe a story like this? In a fit of desperation, Larry left his apartment. He filled the cat's food and water bowls before he left, not exactly sure of how long he'd be gone. He drove to his mother's house, the home he grew up in. It was nearby, less than a 30-minute drive in the suburbs on the outskirts of the city. He couldn't remember how many years it'd been since he'd come here last. Since he stopped coming home for Christmas a few years ago, he rarely ever saw the place anymore. Pulling up to it and parking against the sidewalk, he got out and stared up at the house that looked both familiar and eerily alien to him. His mom had had the fence repainted, the shingles on the roof all redone, the yard remodeled to host a small garden of flowers that ran around the length of the house. Every change to it, every alteration from what he was familiar with, created an uncanny feeling he couldn't shake. This wasn't quite the place he'd lived, and yet it was. He saw the garage door open, his mom's car left abandoned just inside of it. Whoever came to take her to stay in hospice hadn't let her know to hit the button to close the garage door. Larry's key to the front door still worked, and he let himself in. He walked through the old house, the ceiling much lower than when he was a kid, and he scanned his eyes around each room as he passed by them. He knew these rooms, yet so much had changed. All the furniture had been rearranged or replaced. The TV was too new. It wasn't the old heavy giant box he'd watched as a kid. He went to his old room. His mom had cleared everything out of it and turned it into an exercise room. All of the equipment seemed pristine, like it had never been used before. He knew she was remodeling it a few years back, but never saw what she'd done with it. She was always so active, so mobile, right up to the end. She was never sick. I never heard anyone say she was sick. Larry left his old bedroom and went into the living room, taking a seat on a new leather couch. He could see his car through the window behind the giant new TV. He slouched down on the couch a bit. This was so comfy. Not at all like the hard wooden couch with a thin pillow he'd sit on whenever his sister didn't get here and steal the pillow first. The couch they'd grown up on was either kin to a church pew or an actual very short church pew their mom had taken home with her. He turned on the TV. The bills were all still paid for this month, so everything still worked. TV still had all of its channels. Larry was only here because he wanted to be near where his mom had last been. He also needed to get out of his apartment. It was too small and stuffy in there. He felt like he was going to suffocate. This was one of the few places in the world where he had always felt like he belonged, where he could go and feel welcomed. And then I went and ruined it. Whatever show he had been watching went to commercials. He'd forgotten how much he hated normal TV, with commercial breaks seemingly every 15 seconds. And these were no one-and-done ads like you'd get on videos on the internet. Oh no, these were often 7 or 8 fairly lengthy commercials in a row. One commercial was so loud and obnoxious that it snapped Larry out of his trance. A TV lawyer was screaming the phone number for him to call if he'd experienced any form of identity theft. This form of fraud can ruin your life. Like my life can get any more ruined. Wait, fraud. Larry sat up. A new idea sparked in his mind. Turning off the TV, he got up and went into the kitchen to check the drawer next to the silverware. This was the drawer his mom had always kept all of her most important documents in. He had no idea why, but growing up he'd always been aware of that fact. Drawer on the left to get spoons and forks, and never open Mommy's drawer on the right. This wasn't the first time in his adult life he'd opened it, as she finally showed him what all was in here when he was old enough to understand. There was something he needed from it now. Something he could have looked up on the internet easily enough if he owned a freaking smartphone. But given he doesn't, and given his mom never did buy a computer of her very own, he had to find the printed-out version. Here, after only a few brief moments he'd found it, Mom's life insurance policy. His sister had copies of all of these and had taken care of all of the arrangements. Larry was looking through the docs for the first time, only looking for the phone number to call the company. He didn't need to know any other details. Larry had to navigate a series of press 1-2 menu options before he was finally put on the line with a live operator. How may I direct your call? Was all he got after 30 minutes of trying to get through to someone. Just one more step that frankly could have been handled by a robot too. If they have so many pre-recorded messages, why even bother stopping them at this penultimate step of getting to talk to a real human? I'd like to report a case of life insurance fraud. Okay, I'll direct you to our legal department. A moment later, Larry was on the line with a very stiff, serious-sounding man. You believe you found a case of insurance fraud? The guy asked. Yes, I have found one, Larry said. The case you have on Mabel Wilson. Ah, yes. I have here that she recently passed away. Did you know her? She was my mother. My condolences. No, it's fine. She's not dead, Larry said. I committed insurance fraud. I'm calling to report myself. I'm sorry, come again? The guy's demeanor broke, revealing his stern act to truly have only been an act. My mom is still alive. I committed insurance fraud. I lied to everyone to convince them she was dead. I set up a fake body for the wake and make sure the funeral was closed casket. In their grief, nobody noticed the body was fake. Hold on, are you aware that we're recording this call? And we will be taking your words very seriously. Good, because they're true. Everything I'm telling you right now is true, understand me. My mother hasn't been seen locally because she's been on vacation in Hawaii. She's been sipping pineapple juice and getting a tan and even going surfing at her age. She's been having the best time of her life on the beach and has no idea that I totally pulled a fast one on you and cashed out on her life insurance plan. Sir, if you're confessing to all of this, are you hoping to try and avoid jail time? Yes, that's what it is. I'll pay you back. Every penny. Just bring my mother back. I believe that will be up to the airports to bring her back. What was your name again? We'll be contacting some special agents to discuss these matters with you soon, the guy said. Larry gave the guy his name and contact info without hesitation. My mom. She's been away a while now, but she's due home any minute. You'll be hearing from us soon. I strongly recommend you answer your phone on the first ring when our agents call you. The guy hung up on him, and Larry looked at his phone as he pulled it from his ear. It was drenched in sweat. Cold, cold sweat. He closed the drawer in the kitchen and walked back into the living room. He sat down on the couch and stared out the window. Several cardinals had taken to perching on the white fence outside, the short white fence that didn't even wrap all the way around the house, as it needed space for his mom to back her car out. Larry had always asked what the purpose of a fence that didn't go all the way around was. It's for the birds, she had told him. And the birds were still using it, still happily enjoying their perch after all these years, even if it had been repainted recently. The birds didn't seem to mind that at all. A taxi pulled up outside, the bright yellow instantly getting Larry's attention. His heart sped up. The back door of the taxi opened up, and his mom stepped out the back seat wearing a huge straw hat and sunglasses, layers and layers of lace around her neck, and a large pineapple that had been cut in half horizontally with a straw sticking out of it in one hand. She was smiling, beamingly happy at the cab driver as she paid him off. She looked just like she'd been really thoroughly refreshed by her vacation to Hawaii.